Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mike, the American analyst, and today we are doing a bit more of a deep dive on Pete Buttigieg. Pete has a lot of momentum right now in the Democratic primary race, so we're going to break down my thoughts and feelings on some of his personal beliefs. If you like what I do, please be sure to subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter and Minds. Now, let's get into it. Okay, so doing a bit of a later upload tonight, and that's primarily because I wasn't sure entirely what I had wanted to talk about. And I started hearing the news of the day, and Pete's obviously coming up a lot. People are still calling him Pete the Cheat. It seems that he is going to be edged out barely by Bernie in Iowa in terms of the total vote, but tied with Bernie in terms of the total number of delegates. So that kind of got me thinking about Pete and Bernie. And also, furthermore, I wanted to start been a little bit of Fence City in the last few videos. So I wanted to start voicing my opinions on particular subjects, which brought me to looking into Mayor Pete, as well as some of the things that he personally believes and my thoughts on them. So let's get right into it. The main focus today is going to be this Vox article from March 28th, 2019. This is an interview, one of the first interviews that he did, and it was directly after he announced his candidacy. It was within a month, and it's important to note they do not have the entirety of this interview. Again, it was a phone call. This is not it. This is a later interview, and they have a further one down here that is another podcast, but it is not this. It is not this. That is important to note. This really annoys me. I really, really don't like it when sources do not release the full transcript of things. I get it. 100% I get it. Things have to be entertaining. Like, cut out the boring stuff. I'm with you 100%. But at the end, for the people who do what I do, at the end, link the entire thing. Because the fact that the whole thing is not linked really, really makes me nervous about anything like this. Especially right here, this phrase. This is right after they do a bit of an intro on what they talked about. Lightly edited for length and clarity. Okay, length, I got it. I get it. But clarity, like in what context? But, this is all we have to go off. And if this is all you have to go off, that's what you go off. So, let's get right into it. There are a lot of candidates. Okay, before we get into it, this is from 2019 March timeframe, March 20th, 2019. There are a lot of candidates. Make your case. Why should we vote for you despite the experience gap? So they go into this a little bit. It's pretty generic stuff. Basically, I run a city. Nobody else really runs a city. It's very similar to being president. Bam. All right. Good enough for me. And then this is where it starts to get interesting, and why I wanted to do this particular article. So, as you put it, stemming from racial anxieties versus economic anxieties. I assume you followed his debate. How do you feel about it? Okay, so this is the saying, like, are all Trump supporters racist? That's kind of what the interviewer Zach is getting at. Like, do people vote for Trump because they're racist, or do they vote for Trump because they're concerned about the economy? Or I should say, did they? Because this was in 2019. And Pete's answer is a bit Fence City, which is what I tried not to do. So he's more vulnerable to being radicalized. A lot of Americans think they're being radicalized by this administration. So he basically says that there are economic problems, and that's why they voted for Trump. But it's not the entire reason. So fair enough to him. It's a fine answer. Didn't really delve into what the interviewer had wanted him to. Okay, so sorry for the jump cut. I'm really trying not to do those on these opinion/news segments, but I clicked on this prominent feminist critics link, and this person's page no longer exists. Basically shut down this entire tab, so I'm cutting that out. Deal with it. Okay, so I want to ask you about another controversial thing about your experience. One of the things, okay, so this is about the prominent feminists. Basically, they're saying they believe that it would be easier. Would it be easier if you were a woman, or would it be more difficult if you were a woman running in this particular race? And they bring up Senator Warren. They believed at the time that he was getting undue attention because he was a man. And okay, so now we got Pete's response. Okay, well, if somebody is pointing out that there are advantages, many of them unfair, that go along with being male in our society, then I completely agree. If somebody is saying that I should not compete because I am a man, I don't know what to say to that. And if somebody is saying that I had it easy, I would invite them to join the military and enter Indiana politics in 2010 as a gay person. See how easy they find it. First off, the last sentence, hey, good on you, man. I believe you. I feel like it's much easier now. In some ways, it's a benefit. If you come out as a gay person, particularly in politics, in many ways, it's actually a benefit. But in 2010, right on, brother. I mean, that must have taken some courage at the time. I 100% believe that. Now, getting into this portion right here. Many of them unfair. Yeah, I would say that. Many of them unfair. What I would say to that is that people have unfair advantages. One of my biggest issues is categorizing whole groups of people and ascribing to them entire experiences. So you have men and women. Oh, well, men have unfair advantages. Well, some do. And some are homeless. And some get murdered and some get robbed. So this really gets under my skin. Many of them unfair. Yeah, of course. People have unfair advantages. Americans do. If you live in this country, you're one of the most wealthy people who have ever existed, not just now, but in the entire history of humanity. So, yeah, many of them unfair? Sure. Many of them probably are unfair. Is it unfair that we live now versus in Roman times? I personally don't think so. It's just two different time periods. So, no, I don't think it's unfair. I don't think it's unfair at all. Different people have different advantages. You got to look at people on an individual basis. You just have to. All right, so then Zach goes ahead and changes the subject. And this is the last thing that I wanted to talk about for now. I want to pivot a bit and talk about the socialism versus capitalism debate happening in the Democratic Party right now. How would you identify yourself? Again, this is the identity thing. I really don't like it, and I respect a couple of Pete's answers in this. Socialism has largely lost its meaning in American politics because it has been used by the right to describe pretty much anything they disagree with. I don't think so. I think that's unfair, but okay. To the extent there's a conversation around democratic socialism, even that seems a bit squishy in terms of what it actually means. I 100%. I have no idea what that means. I think of myself as progressive, but I also believe in capitalism, but it has to be democratic capitalism. Okay, so what we have now. Part of the problem is that you have one generation growing up associating socialism with communism, like they're the same thing. Fair enough, they're not. And therefore also assuming that capitalism and democracy were inseparable. I'd say are, but I guess it's a matter of perspective. Capitalism and democracy were inseparable. So should we separate them? Is that the argument? I guess it would have to be, right? But I'm assuming it's saying we should separate capitalism from democracy rather than democracy from capitalism. That would be the only thing that would make sense, I would say. And negotiating that tension is probably the biggest challenge for America. We don't have to look for examples of capitalism without democracy. Russia leaps to the mind. When you have capitalism, you get crony capitalism. That's true. And eventually oligarchy. Don't entirely know about that. Healthy capitalist. Okay, so he's saying we have to use regulation. Pretty middle of the road opinion. That's what it goes. That's what it boils down to. Okay, so rule of law talks about regulation. And that's pretty much okay. So go back to the word. Why do you shy away from using it to describe your own views? Why do you prefer to describe yourself, to see and describe yourself as a capitalist? I don't shy away from anything. I like this response. I think a lot of people need to stand up for what they believe in. So Pete's saying, look, I don't shy away from anything. I'll respect on that one. A lot of positions embraced by libertarians and conservatives. Okay. So he kind of just rambles on a little bit. All right. So it seems like a good segue, or good enough, rather. I think that, yes, people don't understand the ideologies of socialism versus communism, but it would seem to me that the major difference is the means in which you attain the end. I'm certain people will disagree with me, but that's my impression. So you have socialism, which is the collective control of the means of production, and you have communism, which is the same thing, except one of them you vote for it, and the other one you just take it. That's very simple, very reductive. I understand that, but I also think it's fair. I think it's pretty fair. Also, I've seen some of the extent to which you can have private property is another distinction. However, it's not that big of a distinction, which is why I think that it's not entirely unfair to say that they're very similar. If I vote, if I vote to take your money, is it worse than if I just took it? I don't know. You tell me, I guess. But that brought me into some very interesting points, which is our actual last thing I wanted to talk about. Pete Buttigieg's father was a Marxist professor who lauded the Communist Manifesto. This is a smear piece. Let me just say that up front. You could say I'm poisoning the well on this piece, but this is what it is. I'm sorry. This is a 100% smear. It's true. It is true. Maybe not this second part. But he was a Marxist professor. That's certainly true. He taught a course at Notre Dame that was called Literary Critique from a Marxist Perspective. So, that is fair to say he was a Marxist professor. That also does not mean that Pete is responsible for his father, or that even his father was a bad person. I think he has bad views, but doesn't mean he's a bad person. And they link two articles in here. Both of them appear to be legitimate. Or I should say one of them. One of them is hidden behind a paywall. I couldn't verify that it actually existed. This particular one, though, I found this one from many different sources. And here's his dad right here, Joseph A. Buttigieg. So, look, this is clearly a smear. I don't believe people are responsible for what their ancestors did. I think that makes absolutely no sense. And which brings me to this next article. The grotesque red baiting of Mayor Pete. It's been a pretty long video already, so I'm going to try to go through this quick, and they make some good points, but this is also a smear. They're also saying that anybody who criticizes socialism and or communism is smearing someone. They accuse people of, McCarthyism, like they just scream that. And, it's like, no, you can have legitimate critiques of that ideology. I think most critiques of it are probably legitimate. So they do make good points in reference to this, which is what I also wanted to say. So this was written on April 2nd, 2019. This was written April 3rd, 2019. So clearly this was a response. So this is just like, don't believe everything that you see here. I mean, this is 100% a smear, but so is this. They're both smears from different perspectives. And certainly that also applies to my videos. Hey, check down on me. I'm sure there's things I'm going to get wrong. I'm certain of it. I also did this as a bit of a caveat. It's Mayor Pete, or rather it's South Bend / St. Joseph County, Indiana's voting record. Now, St. Joseph, this is also misleading because right here, you see how they voted in presidential elections since 2000. And they voted for a Republican once in 2004. But it said South Bend. It's actually not. It's actually, let's see. Here it is. It's actually St. Joseph County. So, bam, here's another one. It took me 5 seconds to find an inconsistency in this particular website. So, I mean, you have to watch out for anything that you're looking at, anything could be wrong. This is not South Bend. This is St. Joseph County. Big difference. South Bend, Indiana, has elected a Democratic mayor every single year since 1970. In the 1970s. See, again, I don't want to tell you something that's wrong. Since the 1970s, they have elected a Democratic mayor every single year. So, I mean, fair enough to him. I think it's a legitimate. I'm not trying to take anything away from it. I'm sure it was a very impressive victory. But St. Joseph County is more conservative than the actual city of South Bend. And I think that's going to be a big criticism for Pete going forward as to how well can he compete on the national level. All right. Whew. So, very long video today. I'm going to get this down, I swear, of how long I want these to go versus how much time I want to spend rambling or whatever. Thank you all for joining me. If you're watching this at 11 o'clock at night, thank you very much. You are my most dedicated fan, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. Have a good one. Thank you all for listening. This is Mike, the American Analyst. Follow me on Twitter, Minds, and subscribe to me on YouTube. And be sure to hit that bell notification. I'll be coming out with new videos every single day for your viewing enjoyment. Have a good one.